Welcome to the Expert Network Team podcast,
where our goal is to inform and educate our listeners on matters related to finance, legal, insurance, accounting, and other interests that are of personal and business nature.
We hope you will find our content useful as well as entertaining. The Expert Network Team consists of Carl Frank of A&I Financial, Mike Miller of Miller and Associates CPAs, Jeff Kromendijk of Security First Insurance Agency, and I'm Nathan Merrill. I'm an attorney at Goodspeed & Merrill.
Together, our independent team combines our expertise to provide you insights and solutions, some straightforward, some profound, for real-life opportunities we see on a daily basis. We hope you enjoy the information contained in today's podcast and find it useful. If you'd like to learn more or desire to meet with any of the Expert Network team members in person, you can contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
We encourage you to take advantage of a free consultation with any of our team members. Just mention this podcast when you schedule your appointment.
Now on to today's podcast. Welcome to today's podcast. I'm here. We got a full house today, actually. More people than we have microphones, if you could see into our world. So we've got Mike Miller of Miller and Associates, CPAs.
Hey, Nate.
Jeff Kromendijk of Security First Insurance Agency.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
Our beloved Carl Frank of A&I Financial Services.
Thank you for having us.
And I am Nathan Merrill, attorney at Goodspeed & Merrill. And our guest today is Cameron Morgan, also of A&I Financial, one of Carl's expert financial advisors. And our topic today is going to be a little focused beyond just financial planning. We're going to be focusing on some of the unique challenges for planning for college expenditures, college savings, college expenditures, just basically finding out ways that we can, as parents, all of us here have had at some level children we've had to either currently or in the past finance through college, how we best strategize to cover that nut. So welcome, Cameron.
Thanks so much, Nate.
So I'll kick this off perhaps and just ask you, when you're meeting with clients and this question comes up, how do you approach that with them?
Well, first of all, I always emphasize that I'm a parent too. I've got an 18-year-old, I've got a 12-year-old, and just like any parent, I would run in front of a bus for my children. So I try to empathize quite a lot that, college is very, very expensive, and there are kind of right ways and wrong ways to do this. I think the wrong way is to let your mama bear or papa bear urges come out and say, oh, you get into the best school you can, honey, we'll figure it out. Like those are the three most important or dangerous words.
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And I always say, when your kid was a little toddler, you held their hand and you didn't let them run into the street, even if they really wanted to. You didn't let them cross the street by themselves. So don't let them go into this big college decision by themselves. Be there with them.
There's a lot of wisdom in that. You actually comparing to keeping them safe like they were when they were kids to letting them choose the right college. Tell me more about that. What do you mean?
Well, one of the important, I should say there are three really important things to consider when you're looking at college. There's the academic fit, right? What's the program or the career that your kid is interested in pursuing, maybe has some strengths and passions in. So academic fit's very important. Social fit is also very important. I would have withered in the Pacific Northwest. I actually did wither in Chicago. The winters were brutal. I don't know what I was thinking coming from Colorado. So things like the size of the school and where it's located, that's important. That's social fit. But financial fit is also very important. The amount of college debt, student debt in our country tripled between 2006 and 2016 from $500 million to $1.5 billion.
That's huge. That's huge. So there's a risk with the fit. Those are really wise words. So like you'd mentioned, the financial fit is a huge one.
It's huge. And even though discounting is giant, and by discounting, I kind of compare that to Bed Bath & Beyond. When you go to Bed Bath & Beyond, you always take your coupons. Never go in there without a coupon. Why? Because their prices are a little higher. That's how they get you in the doors with the coupon. You feel like you're getting a deal. I don't know if you're really getting a deal or not, but that's kind of how they've set it up. And colleges are somewhat similar. The average discount last year was 56% off sticker.
56?
Yeah.
Holy cow.
I'm not sure if that's the pricing you got.
Holy cow.
We missed something, Carl.
We're going to have to talk about that. We're going to have to talk about that part. But, along with this fit goes, and you hear a lot of this these days, especially with your elite institutions, that you're as much buying an education as you are a pedigree or a membership in a club, so to speak. And so you also have to kind of look at the ROI, the back end ROI is some of the reasons you're paying more at a Yale or a Harvard or a Princeton. Not that I'm big fans of any of those, go wash you. But is you're buying your way into a network of potential employment, potential lucrative opportunities. As much as we probably don't like to admit it, that's probably the reality of it.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that.
I don't know. I disagree. I think that's oversold. And my grandfather, my great grandfather, and my uncle, my cousins who went to Harvard would probably say, "No, we really bought into that." I went to Northwestern. It definitely benefited me immensely. But I think that the cachet of those top tier schools is oversold for a lot of kids. I think they fall in love with the brand. They think if they can just go there, their life will be all set.
Right.
And it's yes and no. I don't know if your life is all set if you come out with $200,000 or $300,000 of debt. I don't know that that's the right option for
Right.
a lot of kids. I think there are way more kids who think it's better to get that brand name education than who really get the benefit out of it, or
Right.
who wouldn't benefit from maybe applying to one of those schools as a junior when it's easier to get in because there's been some attrition. Maybe you go to community college for 2 years first and then transfer. You often have a lot easier time getting in if you're that caliber student.
Right. And maybe your point is well taken. Maybe it's oversold. Maybe that's what the Ivy League institutions want you to believe. But at the end of the day, performance is performance, right? You have
Yeah.
to be able to do the work, to do the job,
Right.
not just get the job, right?
And I think you have to look at, it's a little bit tough to have that conversation. And we actually have a brochure you can get called Having the College Money Talk with Your Child, to have that real nuts and bolts conversation about what your family can actually afford. And if your student is a student with a high GPA and or high test scores, you can use those, you can play those cards to get into a top college, but you're not going to get money. If you apply to a college that's maybe a little less exclusive, a less highly selective school, you're going to get money. That's how colleges show that they want you. You have merit and you look like their top 10% of students, their top quartile students, they're going to give you money, and that's what you're looking for.
So talking about the funding side or the planning side of it, like assuming that we're not going to get huge discounts, which apparently may not have been the case for some of those at the table, and let's assume that let's leave student loans a little bit off the table. So let's talk about truly planning for college education expenditures. And then I'm going to limit my fact pattern here a little even more, which is to say I'm not going to give you a fact pattern that has someone whose child is 6 months old. I'm going to give you someone whose child is 16 years old. So we'll start with that kind of planning scenario. How does someone approach, preparing for the financial rigors of providing for college late stage planning wise?
I think you teed it up really beautifully. I think that's much more similar to the reality that I see with clients. They don't come in at 6 months old and start saving $750 a month. That's just not, that's only how it works in the kind of wholesaler brochures.
In the PowerPoint.
Yeah, in the PowerPoint. It's kind of all about mortgage theory, like start early and save aggressively. I'm like, oh, because you don't have other expenses when they're 6 months old? You have so many expenses.
Diapers
when
are
they're 6 months old.
$750 a month.
Yeah, they're a lot. So a lot of families intend to start saving by the time their kid is 2, and they don't really start saving until their kid is 6. And I think that's all about daycare. I think it's just, daycare and or one parent not being in the workforce. So real saving doesn't often start until your child is in elementary school, and even then it's not a significant number. So most people get into the situation that all of us parents of teenagers here are in, which is you have to plan a little later. And as we know with financial planning, the earlier you start, the better off you are, but sometimes you have to start a little later. Retirement is more important than college. So the first thing I do with parents who are clients is, we make sure that we have at least a quick understanding of their retirement readiness. So just a quick thumbs up, you're ahead of the game for retirement. Flat hand, you're right on track. Or oops, we're not quite where we need to be for college. If we don't know that, for retirement. If we don't know that, we don't know how much of their current earnings we can divert to college. So we need to do a quick retirement readiness before we can do any kind of college planning. And then it comes down to looking at college as a 4-year purchase. So not looking at year one. Can we afford year one? Well, maybe we can, but then we're stuck and our kid loves the school and oh no. So looking at it as a 4-year proposition. So we want to add up parent resources, which include 529 plans, American Opportunity Tax Credit if their incomes aren't low enough to qualify for that, and resources that they can identify for that kid. So not just like, oh, generally I have an IRA, or oh, generally I have home equity, but like I'm going to allocate $40,000 to this child and $40,000 to the next child or whatever. So you add up your parent resources. We want to avoid parent loans. You add on to that student resources, which would look like summer job savings, any upmonths they might have, and then student loans, which we want to cap at 1 times what they're going to earn with their chosen career. So if you're studying computer engineering, you can borrow about $75,000 over the course of your 4 years. If you're going to study education, please don't borrow more than about $38,000 over the course of your 4 years. So we add those together, and that's your 4-year budget.
What about underwater basket weaving?
Underwater basket weaving, poetry. Oops, sorry, Carl.
Hey, I remember that.
So you want to try to match the amount you're borrowing to the amount you're likely
Sure.
to earn so that your repayment is fine. And again, it's not always about borrowing a lot to go to the school of your dreams. Sometimes parents don't need to take out any loans. They can write that check for $300,000 for 4 years per kid. But nobody wants to overpay or overspend on college. So having a budget for all 4 years of college is one way to avoid overspending and overpaying for college.
So one of the things I heard you say just real briefly, and you may have skipped over it quickly here, and I maybe didn't hear it all in its entirety, but you talked a little bit about the students' resources. Mm-hmm. And I think there's something there that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, because it's always like a better result when people have skin in the game, including our kids, right? So what are some of the guidelines that you encourage, not to tell parents how to parent, right? But
right.
What are some of the things that you encourage parents to do around, making sure that the kid's bought in?
I'm going to layer on top of that the risk of the child having too much where it affects their impact for financial aid. Mm-hmm. So kind of balancing between skin in the game and how much is too much.
Yeah, I mean, I think my favorite way to have the responsible kid who then doesn't become ineligible for, if there's need-based aid
right.
in the equation. If there's need-based aid in the equation, then your kid has a summer job, then Roth IRA is often a good option, because those retirement accounts don't show up in the financial aid calculation. Primary home equity doesn't show up in the financial aid calculation. So if you're sitting on $100,000 in a savings account and you've got a mortgage, well, maybe one strategy would be to pay off that mortgage. That $100,000 is suddenly not visible, if need-based aid is something that you're aiming for or likely to get. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it does. Although, I'd maybe just like from one parent to another, just maybe and all of us can weigh in on this. But what are we expecting our kids to put in in the equation? I'm
a big fan of working. I worked during college. I worked in the summers. I worked during the school year, just a little bit, and yeah, it definitely focused my attention on my contribution. I also always felt that there should be 6 names on my diploma. There were so many people helping me to get through school. It wasn't just me. I did the school work, but there was a whole team of people who got me across the finish line. As a parent, I lean really heavily on a book by a guy called Ron Lieber called The Opposite of Spoiled. And he's got strategies for everything from, a 2 or 3-year-old all the way up to a teenager to sort of get them taking responsibility for their own money. How that looked in our family was we gave our son a pretty big allowance. I think he was getting like $350 a month in 7th grade. But he had to pay for his lacrosse registration fees. He had to pay for his bus fare, or his bus pass, he had to pay for his clothing and his haircuts and his lunches. So it was the same amount of money. It cost me the same amount of money as it cost me the year before that, but I put it in his hands. So in that way, we started to kind of train him up in how to spend his money, how to save his money, and he had to pay for all of his. We paid for safety equipment, so helmets, and we paid for
And
things.
his hair got really long.
His hair got really long. Yeah, all of his haircut money went to Sonic. So I had to
I
live.
didn't know Sonic spurred hair growth. That's a new one for me.
I might need that.
Nice one, Carl. I'm going to throw kind of a technical, back to the technical side from the soft side of this planning question. How do you account for or what do you use as a guide for the inflation expectation when it comes to education expenses? Because as I understand it, those costs have typically outpaced our usual inflation experience.
Yeah, it's 2 to 3 times normal inflation.
Which is what?
If you're using like a 1 to 2%.
So really
U.S.
like
inflation, so
5
it's
or
really in the 5 to
6%?
6.
Okay.
So from the 2010-2011 school year until the 2019-2020, so most recent full year we had, college tuition went up 28%. Aid went down by 1% in that same time. So, the stock market went up. So hopefully, the money you used to pay for college was invested during that time. The stock market did outperform colleges, but it doesn't always.
Well, especially in some of these tax preference accounts where you can't control portfolio performance directly.
Right.
So,
Right.
is that kind of why you lean to some of the other devices like Roth IRAs, perhaps, or what are the strategies you would employ with a client to help them get ready for that?
I'm a big fan of the 529 if you're headed to college. I'm a huge fan of maxing your retirement account simply because that takes so much money out of the picture from a financial aid point of view. Income matters more than assets, though, so there's only so much we can do with moving assets around to improve your expected family contribution. I do find, though, usually moving kids' money into Roths, if they have earned income, can be a terrific way to help with that calculation. Sometimes grandparents are involved, and there's some strategies around not having the grandparents pay for the first 2 years of college. Just a quirk in the system that it's actually going away in 2023. But up to now, right now, if grandparents pay for the first year of college, it's considered child income, which is really bad for your expected family contribution. So it's better to have grandparents just pay for years 3 and 4 of college, not years 1 and 2, just because of how it plays with the mix. So that can be a family conversation of, these are the resources we have available, and then here's how we're going to cash flow it. Parents are going to cash flow more the first 2 years, and then they're off the hook a little bit, and that's when the grandparents can step in, rather than spreading the grandparent aid over all 4 years and hurting your expected family contribution.
So going back to my bad hypothetical, what's your ideal hypothetical? If you could create the ideal client profile and make a recommendation to all those listeners out there who this is an impending problem for them, what's your ideal recommendation?
I would say having conversations with your kid about what's realistic for your family and not getting too caught up in the mania of the college application season. It gets, especially with teenagers, there gets to be some high emotions.
Well, let's assume the child's 3, and I'm not going to have
if they're
that.
3, okay.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you were to create your ideal client profile, and you have someone who's disciplined enough, let's put it that way, to identify their diaper money and their daycare money and still find something to contribute, how would you suggest that someone really look responsibly at getting ahead on this?
The old rule of thumb has been save a third, cash flow a third during the college years, and borrow a third. And that's not a horrible place to start.
So your target for savings would be a third of what your anticipated college costs would be. And you just back into that, and then you run your little calculator. And
you sort of know what your family expectations are. Is your family, all about the Ivy League? Is your family more of a state school family? You don't have really any idea at age 3 what your kids' strengths and weaknesses are going to be, their passions, if they're, headed for college or not. But At the same time, as a parent, you can have certain expectations, and you can start having those conversations, telling a little embarrassing truth about myself. I didn't actually know that people didn't go to college until I was 15 years old. That's how watertight of a bubble my parents had designed around me. I was going to college. I didn't even know it was an option not to go to college.
I only thought there was one. That
Right.
was the University of Utah. There were no other options.
Right. No. So there's definitely a lot of mind control that you can bring into the picture if that's, if you don't mind what my parents did. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the and this gets onto the softer side, just to show that I'm not all technical numbers and things like that. But I've always encouraged my kids to apply to the Ivy League schools to see if they're that caliber, and then wherever they go, if they get into a Harvard, or if they get into a UVA, and if they end up going to a lesser, stature
University
school.
of Utah?
No, BYU. If they end up going to BYU, let's just use that hypothetical, perform or have the attitude like you would if you were going to an elite institution, and just perform at that level. So because they don't have a corner on the market of intelligence. Right,
and I mean anymore with these kind of global nomads and remote work and that opportunity that the internet, the internet was not a thing when I was in college. There were no internet millionaires at that point. I think it's very exciting to see all the different directions people can go. It's not such a linear path. And I'm the firstborn. I'm also the oldest grandchild on both sides. So I was very much going to follow the path that was laid out for me. But it's been interesting to watch, even in my own family, the paths that people take. It's not, you don't have to just go in a straight line. So one thing I would add, circling back to that a third piece, that's under the assumption that you're already saving enough for retirement. So
Sure. That's why I say it's your ideal client profile. We've already checked that box.
Okay, good. Because retirement
they got good
comes
life
first.
Insurance, and they're living in the appropriately sized house and all that other fun stuff. I mean, that's actually what probably drives a lot of that ideal client profile, is a well-balanced financial management attitude. But
good behavior makes a lot of my clients look successful, and I always take the credit if I can. But
well, that has been very informative. I think that this is an area that gives a lot of folks kind of a little bit of anxiety, the retirement anxiety, but sooner, I would say. So certainly appreciate your insight and your guidance on to our listeners on helping figure this out. And I think we'd love to have you back to talk about a few more topics that I think were outgrowths of this. So we'll certainly make arrangements for that. In the meantime, we'll sign off for today's podcast.
Thank you very much, Cameron. That was great.
Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Cameron. It's good to be in the room with other parents that have college kids. And, maybe our next podcast with Cameron, we can talk a little bit more about some of those things, some of the challenges, but also, just some of the things that we found in common. So that'd be great. Thanks for coming.
Glad you enjoyed
Make it
it.
a beautiful
Thanks.
day.
Thank you for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the information we shared.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to share it with someone else. And join us next time.
If you want to meet with a member of the team, please contact us at info@expertnetworkteam.com. That's info@expertnetworkteam.com.
If you have special topics you'd like to hear about, please reach out to us and let us know at the same email address. Again, that's info@expertnetworkteam.com. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you for listening to this podcast. We want to remind you that listening to this podcast does not establish a client-professional relationship with any of the firms represented, nor does it constitute legal, investment, or accounting advice, and the views are those of the professionals only.
Investment advisory services may be provided through A&I Financial Services, and securities may be provided through Genios Wealth Management.